Hey you guys, it's Amanda. So today I'm going to try to film this video and talk about picking up on the thoughts or thought patterns of other people. And this is just another aspect of being an empath. I feel like it's not talked about quite as much as the emotional side. There's a lot of information about picking up or taking on the emotions of other people, but there's less information on the thoughts and thought patterns of other people. And I just kind of feel like it seems a bit invasive to be picking up on the thoughts of other people, but it's not an intentional thing. It's just something natural that happens. You're not really ever trying to. Just like someone would describe, the emotional side of it being a curse, the thought side of it is also could be seen as a curse as well. But just like the emotional side, I think there's like a reasoning for it, and I feel like most empaths are going to be like natural counselors or therapists, just even as small as being like an ear to talk to or whatever, or just, being able to really listen to another person. Sorry, it's really hard for me to find a place where I can be alone and like not realize that there's people that are like, why is this person here? Like, why is this person sitting in their truck or whatever? And I notice it. So that's like another thing with the thoughts or whatever. Like everybody does this as humans. Like, we're sentient or whatever. So on a smaller scale, it could be like you just get a feeling that someone's like looking at you, and you turn and see them looking at you because you felt that energy. But this is just like, I feel like with empaths, it's like all the time, and it's just really hard to like not be affected by it. So you try to do your best to like ignore it or whatever, but as I'm sitting here, I'm like, there's like so many people, just like people cutting in the grass that are like driving by. Anyways, I'm gonna try to deal with it, so whatever. Anyways, so let me best explain this. It's kind of hard. It's like if somebody asked you to explain like urination, like it's something that you just do, like you naturally do it. It's hard to explain how it works or whatever. But okay, so if we agreed that all things are energy, right? So even thoughts have their own energy. And you know what an aura is. It's kind of like each person's energetic field. It kind of stretches out beyond them. And this is what happens with thoughts. Like, you hold thoughts in your energetic field. And like, I feel like empaths kind of have this invisible antenna, and it just picks up on those things. And there's certain times when, it's easier to pick up on thoughts. And I'll go over those as well. I have notes, but I probably won't refer to them. So anyways, I would say number one is when the thoughts have an emotion attached to them. Like, emotion really charges the energy of a thought, so it's much easier to pick up on those thoughts. Also, when thoughts are spoken, that also charges the energy. They're no longer a thought, they're being expressed. It holds like I guess more energy. That would be my theory on it. So, it's like you can walk up to a group of people and you've been away from them, but when you walk up, you kind of like get a feeling of what they were talking about. That's number two. Number three is when there's a group of people that are thinking or talking about the same subject. It's easier because obviously there's going to be more energy. Someone has a repetitive thought pattern, so it's not something that they've completely expressed maybe, or they haven't reconciled it in their mind, so it's just kind of like circling their mind. It's like something that they think quite often or are thinking quite often. But when there's intention behind a thought, so say you have a thought that's like, I'm going to do this, like this would happen to me, or it still happens to me a lot, like at work, because we have different clients that come in, and I'll just kind of get a feeling. Like, I'm not like, oh, okay, Bob is coming in at 3:45 today. I'll just get a feeling of that person. And at the vet, it was a certain animal. I'll just get kind of a feeling of them. And then consciously, I think, okay, well, it's probably that they're going to come in, just because I've dealt with this for so long that I kind of know, why I'm getting a feeling about something. And generally, that's the first thing that I'll think. So if they have an intention, like, I'm going to do this, it's easier, because they've now made a decision. The last one I'm going to mention is that when you're close with someone, so you have a close relationship with someone, whether it be a mother, a father, a friend, a boyfriend, whatever it is, that makes it a lot easier to pick up on the thoughts and thought patterns of those people. And there's certain times when you're in a space to be more receptive to being able to do this. And it's kind of the same as using your intuition. You need to be calm, you need to be quiet, and you don't always have to be this, but this is generally speaking like how it works best. Calm, quiet, that'll put you in the receptive mode, and just kind of like a baseline emotion. So you're not like too emotional, and that way you can differentiate between, what you're feeling and thinking and when it's coming from another source. So one of the clearest examples of this is like during meditation. So here's just an example. Like one time when I was meditating, I kind of got this feeling come over me, and it was just like Franklin. That was like how it came across. It was like Franklin, like a surprised or shocked or panicked like expression of the word Franklin, and that's my dad's name. And what had happened was, I would say like maybe 10 or 15 minutes later, my mom, maybe 30 minutes later, I don't know, my mom had called me and told me that my dad had fallen actually, and that she was taking him into the hospital. So that's like the most open and receptive I would say that you could be to picking up on thoughts of other people, is when you're in meditation. But it's kind of hard to walk around in like a meditative state all day. Like I said, when I was spending a lot of time alone, my intuition was on blast. Like it was like super easy to kind of get all these different insights and pick up on these different things, and, whatever it was, just because I was alone, I was not dealing with too much stress. There was definitely not a time constraint. So it was super easy for me to do then. Now it kind of happens more sporadically. I have a lot of stuff going on currently, so it's a lot harder. But, it is what it is. So I'm going to share a story with you. It does involve me being on drugs. And obviously I'm not encouraging the use of drugs in order to use your intuition. But when I was on opiates, it did put me in that receptive mode, because it did calm me down. It did slow kind of my own thoughts, and it put me at a baseline of emotion. I was really emotionless, but I traded a lot of stuff just to have that feeling or be in that receptive mode, basically my whole life. So in no way am I encouraging the use of opiates in order to get in that mode. It's just not worth it at all. But I'll go ahead with the story, because it's a good example of picking up on a thought pattern and using your intuition to know what's going to happen. So basically I'd owed this guy, this drug dealer, money for drugs. Okay, I had paid him for drugs using a payment app that was connected to my credit card. And long story short, I probably got to my limit, and so the payment got revoked. So initially he gave me the drugs because it looked like the payment had gone through, and then it was revoked. So he was kind of like obviously pissed. And me being a using addict, every bit of money that I acquired, I was going to use to buy my daily dose of drugs or whatever. Like I didn't have any money. Like I was basically like scrounging around for money to get a new day's worth of drugs. So I didn't have it. I was trying to avoid him, and I was going to get drugs from another person. So basically I went down to Atlanta, probably like a really bad part of Atlanta, like kind of like the ghetto part or whatever. I'm just trying to explain what type of area it was. I'm not being judgmental or whatever. It was just not a good area. It was like Section 8 housing or housing authority. I don't know what it's called, but it's the type of place where it's government assistance. And what happens is you drive up and like people just kind of like walk out to you, to your car to see what you need. So I was meeting a different guy there, and I was sitting in a rental car or whatever, getting ready to use. I think the guy that I was getting drugs from had gone back into his apartment for some reason, and I was sitting in the car, and then all of a sudden the guy kind of like appeared at my door, and he was obviously pissed. So he yanked open my door, and I had my purse in my lap. He snatched my purse out and started like going through it, and like he was yelling at me at the same time, like asking for his money or whatever, and I didn't have it, obviously. So he took my purse and he threw it across the parking lot. And like I remember my drugs were in there, so I needed that, and I think he was still yelling at me. I got out of the car, and then I got this intuition, and it was like kind of like a voice. It's not like you hear another person's voice. It's kind of like just a voice that you're familiar with. It's like your higher self or your intuition. And it just kind of said, he's going to hit you in the back of the head. Like, turn around and give him your back. Let him do it. And we were standing face to face at this time. And so what I did was I turned away and I took a couple steps, like a step and a half in the opposite direction. And he hit me in the back of the head. And it didn't even really hurt. The back of your head is kind of hard, so whatever. And his intention was not necessarily to hurt me with this blow. It was to incite a reaction out of me. So I stayed really calm because I knew he was going to do it. And, he wanted me to be irrational or to fight back or to, just respond in a negative way. And that would give him, the opportunity or the reason to basically beat my ass. So I didn't do that. I stayed extremely calm. I turned around slowly and, made eye contact with him. And I kind of just asked him, I'm like, did you just hit me? And then he, started yelling at me again and like threatening me or whatever. And I basically like picked up my purse and I broke eye contact with him, and I just kind of slowly said, I'm going to call the police. You just hit me. And I don't think that he really believed that I was going to call the police because, I'm a using drug addict. So, I would have obviously probably gotten in some trouble as well. But it was enough the threat or the idea of that was enough to get him to kind of like back off from me. So he did. And, long story short, the guy that I was meeting came out and like kind of talked to him or whatever and was like, this is my business. You can't interfere in my business. Like he was really just selfishly trying to like still make the sale with me, but it did help me out in the end. And whatever. So I kind of got out of that situation, luckily. But that's just an example of like what it's like to kind of like pick up on an intention of someone else or a thought and like use your intuition at the same time. And luckily, that happened that way so that I was able to get out of a really horrible situation. There's other times too, like when I did spend that entire year alone, there were a couple, as an example, okay, so one day I was just sitting there and I got this feeling of this other guy, my friend actually, that I had gotten drugs with and used with for a while. I got a feeling of him and I thought like, oh, I should call him or whatever. But, I was clean at this time, so I was like, okay, what do I do here? And what I ended up doing, just, I don't know, intuitively, was to Google his name. And what I came across was obituary that he had like very recently passed away. And it was just kind of like, I don't know, it's hard to explain. Like there's a very like logical side of me that wants to like use MBTI and things like this in order to explain and reconcile like all these kind of like more mystical things in my mind, even though they've always kind of happened. And it seems less mystical when they happen to you on a pretty daily basis. Like, you don't necessarily talk about them, but it's just second nature to you, you know? And, you know, some things are just inexplicable. Like, they're not, I don't know, it's so hard to explain. So the reason that I even thought to talk about this was because yesterday I got my hair cut, and when I was sitting in the chair, my hairdresser was like, hey, do you walk on this road or whatever? And I was like, yeah, I walk on that road. I walk my dog. And she was like, I just saw you last week. And she was like, I was like, oh, that's my client. And I was like, oh, really? That's so funny. And it was probably like that day or the day after or whatever that I just thought to, you know, make a hair appointment, because that's just kind of like how it works. Like, so somebody thinks about you, like you just get a feeling, and it's like sometimes you don't even know that that's what's happening, but whatever. So it just reminded me to make a hair appointment. And when she said that, I knew, you know, that's what had happened. A lot of times, like, if someone's thinking of you, like, you know it affects you. You know, if they're thinking negatively about you or positively, in some way it'll usually come around to affect you. So it is kind of difficult in some ways, but I just wanted to share my experience so that maybe yours seemed a little less, I don't know, just so you could relate. Anyway, hope that wasn't too long. I know it was, but hope you're having a great day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.